There are 5 podiums on our debate stage tonight. 4 of them are occupied. Let's meet the candidates. We begin with Brian Osorio. Mr. Osorio is 26 years old, married with no children. He is a Delano City Councilman and currently serves as mayor of that fine city. He's also a community solutions advocate for Community Water Center. He holds a joint Bachelor of Arts degree in political science and cognitive science from UC Berkeley and a master's degree in public policy from USC. And he is a lifelong resident of Delano. Mr. Osorio is running on the Democratic ticket for the 16th Senate District. Nicole Parra is also a Democrat. She's 52, single, and an attorney. Ms. Parra is no stranger to politics. She served 3 terms representing California's 30th Assembly District from 2002 to 2008. Most recently, she worked in government relations in Sacramento for Marathon Oil. She holds a bachelor's degree in economics from UC Berkeley and a law degree from the Catholic University School of Law. Nicole Parra was raised in Hanford, but was born in Bakersfield, where she resides today. On the Republican side of the ballot, we have David Shepard, a new face to state politics. He's 29 years old, married with 2 children, and lives in the Porterville area. He's a 4th-generation farmer and helps run E.W. Merritt Farms, the family farm up in Tulare County. Mr. Shepard is a graduate of Porterville Community College and UCLA. Last, but certainly not least, we have Gregory Tatum. He's 62 years old, married with 3 children. He's a long-time resident of Bakersfield and a native of Tennessee. Mr. Tatum is a pastor at Change Community Church. He's a veteran of the U.S. Army and has worked in the aviation field since 1985, most recently for Sierra Space as a tech engineer. Pastor Tatum holds a bachelor's degree in business administration, a master's in divinity, and a doctorate in religious philosophy.
All right, now that we've taken roll call, time for the opening statements, and we cut the cards earlier, right before we came on air, and the high card was drawn by Gregory Tatum, who has elected to go first with his opening statement. So, Mr. Tatum, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Channel 17 in KGET, and those that are watching via television. I'm honored to be a part of this great debate for the 16th District. As he mentioned in the opening statement, I am a U.S. veteran. I'm the only U.S. veteran running for the 16th District. I have been married to my wife, my high school sweetheart, this October, 44 years. We have 9 grandkids, and out of the 9, we have 8 boys. It is my endeavor as a leader, as a person that cares about this district, to make sure people are fed, they have sustainable water, the 1 million acres that of farmland are met with the demands that it calls for. I thank you for this opportunity, and then you will see after tonight, after looking at this debate, you will make the right decision and choose a United States veteran.
Mr. Osorio, you have 1 minute, please.
My name is Brian Osorio. I'm the current mayor of the city of Delano, and I also work for a nonprofit that focuses on connecting residents to safe, clean, and affordable drinking water. I'm running for state senate because we need a new generation of leadership in Sacramento. We don't need more of the same. We need a new vision that embraces our past and present and prepares us for our future. We need a champion that will uplift working class families and middle class families in Sacramento, and that starts with electing a new generation. And I hope to count on your vote on June 7th.
David Shepard, you are up next. Your opening statement.
Well, good evening. I'd like to thank KGET for this opportunity and the other candidates for being here. My name is David Shepard, and I am a husband, a father, and a farmer. My roots in this district go back 4 generations. My dad's grandfather immigrated from Guanajuato, Mexico, settling in Bakersfield. And my mom's grandfather worked his entire life as a fruit picker until he was able to purchase his first plot of land right here in Arvin. Now, my family's story and stories like theirs are increasingly rare. California is no longer a place of opportunity. And working in the field every day, I see firsthand the issues that we are facing. The Sacramento-inflicted water shortage and soft on-crime policies are ruining our state. It's harder than ever for families to get by due to the outrageous cost of living and a 40-year high inflation. It is no surprise that these failed policies have led to more families leaving our state than ever before. As your state senator, I will fight for the Central Valley. I will fight for opening up our natural resources of water and oil, and I will fight for our values. I'd be honored to have your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Parra, you have 1 minute. Opening statement, please.
Thank you. Thank you for Channel 17 for hosting. I want to thank all the listeners and all the candidates. My name is Nicole Parra, and I'm running for the state Senate because we have a lot of issues right here in our community. And I was born and raised here in the Central Valley. I was born to Pete and Yolanda Parra, my brother Peter, my nephews Pete, Luke, and Isaac, and my sister-in-law Erin, and my dog Bailey. I've worked in the federal government, Washington, D.C. for 6 years. I worked as your state legislator in the state assembly from 2002 to 2008. I was the author of the extension of Megan's Law. I was the chair of the Veterans Committee, receiving one of the highest National Guards for a civilian. And I want to be able to use my experience, my 30 years, to be able to get the work done. I'm supported by over 100 local officials, local community members, Republicans and Democrats. I've been to all 38 communities in the 16th Senate District. I understand the issues. I'm excited that there's a new generation of people who want to serve, but we need someone in Sacramento who can hit the red carpet running, who can author bills, legislative oversight, and get the job done. And so I'm here tonight to ask for your support.
Thank you, candidates.
All right, candidates, let's get to a few questions here. First, your thoughts on Melissa Hurtado, who is conspicuous in her absence. Senator Hurtado sent us an email today saying she is tending to pressing business in Sacramento regarding water and the drought. So what do you think about her absence from tonight's debate? Let me start with you, Nicole Parra.
Thank you. She's been absent from the Senate district for 4 years. Why would 100 elected officials and community leaders quickly endorse me for the state Senate? Number one. Number two, it indicates her disrespect for the Kern County voters by not showing up tonight. There's session on Mondays and Thursdays. You get excused from the Senate. I was there in the assembly. What you do is you sign a form and they take you off the per diem, so you don't get paid for when you miss. She also chose us second. When she first decided to run for re-election, she decided to run up in Sanger. She decided to run against Ana Caballero. Then she changed her mind and she decided to run down here in Kern County and move to Bakersfield. We were the second place to the senator. And she doesn't debate, she's not anywhere. And to be honest, it's very frustrating. But let me tell you something. After tonight, I'm not even going to think about Melissa Hurtado. She doesn't think about us. So I'm just going to continue the next 3 weeks talking to voters, meeting the candidates, and really just trying to say to the voters, let's get it done. Let's vote for someone who's going to support our valley.
Okay. Brian Osorio, your thoughts on Ms. Hurtado's absence tonight, sir?
Definitely, I'm disappointed in her not attending, but I'm more disappointed in her votes. I'm going to list a number of votes that I disagree with her on. One, a couple of years ago, I was in McFarland protesting against detention centers that were there after a bill to phase out detention centers had just passed. I would have wished Ms. Hurtado would have been there, but we didn't see her. Also, there was a ban on chlorpyrifos, a pesticide that hurts farm workers and children, yet again, the senator did not vote for this bill. Also, there was a bill to expand worker protections for H-2A farm workers, but again, no vote on this. But on the one time she did vote, it was to vote against a bill that would modernize how farm workers can participate to join a union. And so I'm more disappointed in her votes and legislative history.
David Shepard, Ms. Hurtado is considered a front runner in this race by some estimations. What does she have to gain by not being here, do you think?
I don't think she gains anything other than the fact that she potentially could put herself in a position where she would have to answer some really tough questions. But for someone that didn't live in this district until this race began, it really just goes to show that she's not the right person for the job by not showing up to these events. And so I think more than anything, we can look at the fact that she's relying on Sacramento for everything at this point. So, the fact that she's going to try to probably run ads right after this debate, and she's blitzkrieging us with all of her mailers. It's pretty ridiculous that she wouldn't show up here and just have the bravery. Because in Sacramento, we need someone who's going to stand up for families, someone that's going to stand up for water. She said she's working on water issues. She's had the last 4 years to work on water issues. I wouldn't be here in this race tonight if we didn't have a person in Sacramento that was actually doing their job. So I'm sorry she missed an opportunity to speak to the voters and tell them what she has to offer here.
Gregory Tatum, your thoughts, sir?
I'm very disappointed. Me and Hurtado running some ads on the same channel, so I really thought she would be here. I concur with Nicole Parra. And one of the things as a former military guy is that you do not leave your troops. And she jumped the 14 to look for something easy. She's jumping tonight. You can't continue to go AWOL. You cannot go AWOL. That's showing your constituents that you will not stand up for them. You will not represent them. You will only depend on your advertisement. So I concur with my colleagues here tonight.
Mr. Tatum, thank you. You know, let's get to Ms. Parra here. You describe yourself as a Valley-crat, not really part of the progressive Democratic leadership that's running really the supermajority in Sacramento these days. So Ms. Hurtado also claims to be one as well. You mentioned some of the distinctions between you two already that voters should consider, but where do you really stand in the differences when it comes to both of you on voting lines in Sacramento?
Yeah, thank you. So Valley-crat was a term coined by Cruz Bustamante, and it really shows you put the Valley first. And, you know, Senator Roseanne Buich, I was in Dinuba the other day. She was the first woman elected to the state Senate who really was our true Valley-crat. She was elected at 50 years old, the first woman to be elected to the state Senate. You know, Senator Hurtado and I couldn't be more different. You know, folks say, oh, the two Valley-crats. No. Number one is that on the issues of legislative oversight, if you look at the bills that, or the issues that I worked on, I'm about government accountability, and she is in nowhere regarding legislative oversight. I also supported and authored a number of bills to help our Veterans Committee. I was also the one who co-founded with then Kevin McCarthy, who when he was Republican leader, the San Joaquin Valley Partnership. I also spent years working with the Federal Interagency Task Force to bring in our federal secretaries and our state secretaries. So I think what you're trying to get at is that on the votes on some of the important bills that are related to the Central Valley, when you look at Republicans and Democrats, we vote similar when it comes to economics, but when it comes to strategy, we couldn't be two different people.
Ms. Parra, thank you. All right, Mr. Osorio, you also align yourself with the progressives in Sacramento. What are the values of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party that you embrace, and where voters with the progressives can align yourself with them?
Yes, I think it's a distinction you made there, which is there's progressives within the Democratic Party and there's progressives within the state of California. I think progressives are pro-union, they're pro-farm worker, they're pro-working families above all. They believe in health care for all, education for all, and a strong and equitable economy to uplift our working class families in the Central Valley and throughout California. And so I want to be clear that, you know, this term progressive is often co-opted because there's only a handful of candidates and Democrats that are elected that are corporate free. And so as a progressive running for state Senate, I want to guarantee the people that I put their issues before mine, and I'll advocate for them in Sacramento.
David Shepard, this is your first foray into state politics. If you make it to the November runoff election, Mr. Shepard, you will need a lot of votes from moderate Democrats in this district to win this race. Why should they pick you as opposed to going with one of the other three Democratic candidates?
Yeah, that's a good question. I really think that we have something to offer in this election cycle. It's pretty obvious that the incumbent is, she's controlled by Sacramento. And I think that at this point right now, we have an opportunity to put an independent voice in Sacramento that's going to look to advocate for our district. And so right now, I want to be the candidate that reaches across the aisle and says, this doesn't have to be partisan politics like it has been in the last 8 years. Let's work together to bring our district water, reduce our crime, and revive the American dream. You know, my family was built off of the American dream, and just seeing how difficult it is for families to get by right now, I don't think that this is a partisan issue. I think we can work together, but I really do think that it's time to put an independent voice, someone that's not going to kowtow to the supermajority in Sacramento.
All right, and this question to you, Mr. Tatum. You are certainly no stranger to the political debate stage. In the past, you have run unsuccessfully for the Bakersfield City Council, for mayor of Bakersfield, and even state senate, and here you are tonight. What keeps you coming back, Mr. Tatum, and why should voters consider checking the box next to your name on June 7th?
Because I'm the real deal. The tenacity, and if you, to kind of give you an understanding, when I ran for mayor twice, 25 people ran the first time. I came in 6 out of 25, never ran for a political office. When I ran the second time, I came in the second place out of 5. So I ran really twice for mayor and then for this particular race in city council, so when they asked me to. So they should pick me because I'm not taking money from anyone. I'm putting my own money. I even sold a classic vehicle to run in 2018. So that's why I'm genuine. I can't be bought. I'm not owned by anyone. I'm not a part of any association or clique. That's why you should vote for a real patriot.
Okay, let's get to some issues, candidates. In 2014, California passed Proposition 1. $2.7 billion for water storage projects as a hedge against drought. Since then, not a single shovelful of dirt has been turned in over 8 years. If elected, what would you do to move the needle on water storage projects that would benefit the farms and the cities here in the Central Valley and within the 16th Senate District? Mr. Osorio, let me start with you, sir.
Yeah, so there's a couple layers to that question. One is that definitely there should have been a storage project that's been delayed now, and so we have to cut through the red tape to make sure we get this project going. At the same time, though, we have to acknowledge that water is a limited resource, and so at the same time in 2014, Sigma passed so that we can continue to preserve our water and make sure that we're not having dry years. And so for me, one of the priorities I would have in pushing for this project, but on top of that would be making sure that our farm workers, our Central Valley residents have water as well. We need to take a multi-pronged approach to make sure that residents, agriculture, and the environment are taken into consideration when we talk about water policy.
Ms. Parra, moving the needle on water storage, how would you get it done?
Yeah, two things is that Proposition 1 and SGMA, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, both passed in 2014. And they passed because the voters passed to increase water storage, and at the same time, we're looking at the state looking at groundwater banking. I just finished reading the governor's budget and the legislative analysts analyzing the governor's budget. And in the governor's budget, he talks about the Bay Delta. The Bay Delta has not been updated, the plan to get water quality and look at the issues that are coming down to the Central Valley. Proposition 1, where have those funds been? Voters voted for it in 2014. So one of the things I announced was to audit Proposition 1. And also, if you look at the LAO's analysis of the budget, the governor's May revise, they talk about the Bay Delta. They talk about what are some of the issues causing with funding, why aren't things been funded. Also in the budget, the governor's May revise, there's only $30 million for SGMA planning grants. That's not enough to help with our aquifers and our groundwater basin. So to answer your question, I want to audit Prop 1. I want to fight for more money for our groundwater sustainability for SGMA, and I want to get the Bay Delta plan done.
Mr. Tatum, new water storage in California, how would you attack it?
Well, first of all, Mr. Scott, we understand that because of what's happening with Lake Mead and Lake Powell and Lake Arrow, as well as Colorado River. These are natural situations. I would look at innovative ways that are already out there, already on the table, to make sure we have the groundwater we need to sustain us. We're at 30%. We were at 100%. Now we're at 30%. So looking at innovative ways that we can have more sustainability. And also, I work on space exploration. They're looking at ways to how to work in space to help the water situation, to help agriculture. I'm the 21st century guy. They're not talking about space exploration. They got many ideas we worked on, and they'll be working on in the future. So we'll bring in space exploration, innovative ideas, and we will take it to the next level. Trust me.
All right. And David Shepard, water storage.
So since we've discussed SGMA in some depth, I would like to propose an immediate change that we can do right now, which is to go ahead and just stop the transitional pumping fees that are currently taking place for growers. So for a lot of folks, a lot of farmers right now, they're getting charged ridiculous prices for just pulling water out of the ground, and that was supposed to be used for times like what we're experiencing right now. This is the worst drought we've had in 1,200 years, and it's ridiculous that farmers cannot pull water out of the ground without getting charged for it, because the majority of the world's food is grown in this Central Valley. But with that being said, with sites, Whiskey Flats, these are projects that we passed through bonds, and the fact that Sacramento has not been capable to get anything done just goes to show their ineptitude and why we need to have an independent voice, someone that's going to fight for our district. And I think that first and foremost, we need to be looking into other ways to be bringing outside water sources here to the Central Valley before we continue with transitional pumping with SGMA.
All right, water, water, water. That's what everybody is wondering really in this or I should say drought-infested district. So the Democrats have been firmly in control of state water policy for more than a decade now. So how would you grade the Democratic leadership in Sacramento, including Governor Newsom, for its response to the drought and the water needs of the communities and farmers here in the Valley? We'll start with you, Ms. Parra.
Well, first of all, it's a math question. As we all know, the Democrats are the supermajority in Sacramento. And in the state Senate, there's 31 Democrats and 9 Republicans. And that's why, you know, I think it's great that Republicans are there. But when it comes to passing legislation and being able to get leadership to look at legislative oversight, or when I was the chair of the Joint Legislative Audit Committee, and I worked with 2 senators to get a first-time audit of the State Air Resources Board when we were looking at transportation fuels. That's what we need, is someone who is experienced, someone who has audited state agencies before, and we need to look at auditing Proposition 1 funding. We need to look at legislative oversight of the Bay Delta Accord. We also need to look at SGMA. We have communities like Alpine that have recharge basins. And if they don't get the money and the grants and the technical assistance, they will not be able to have water for their rural communities. We need infrastructure, water quality, and storage. And we need a Democrat, a moderate Democrat, who can go up there and get things done.
So real quick, give me a grade.
Give you a grade of
on the Democratic leadership when it comes to water.
D.
D. All right. Mr. Osorio, how would you grade the water resources for the Democratic leadership here in the state?
I think a couple things we have to acknowledge is that in 2014, we had a drought. It's 2022, and we're still in a drought. And so while SGMA is in the right direction, we need to continue to add investments to support our local GSAs and community leaders so that they are actually effective in reducing overdrafting here in the Central Valley. And so for me, on a grade, I'd give it a B. It's in the right direction, but there's so much more work to be done.
Mr. Shepard, your thoughts and a grade.
I would rate it as an F. Clear up front. I think they've failed us. I think they failed my community of Porterville, East Porterville. I think they continue to fail other communities like Lindsay. There's just ineptitude, and frankly, Sacramento does not care about our district. And just throwing this out there, if these politicians were actually doing their job, we wouldn't be in this predicament that we're in. We need a new face. We need someone that's going to take the fight to Sacramento, that's going to advocate in a way that hasn't been done. Because if legislators were doing their jobs like the current incumbent, we wouldn't be in this situation.
Mr. Tatum, how would you grade the Democratic leadership when it comes to water resources and water policy?
I would grade them just like with somebody lapel a flag, which is an F, a big fat F. Having Prop 1 available, not taking and utilizing it, when we know that people are suffering. We have over 1 million acres of farmland in the Central Valley. Families need to be fed. We're feeding so many people in many places. So the big F is the call of the day, the flagship of that grade.
Mr. Tatum, thank you. All right, we do have an interactive debate, right?
We do.
We have a viewer question, and for that we want to turn to our political reporter, Maddie Gannon, over at the news desk. Maddie, what do you have for us?
Alex, on Jim, this question comes to us from Lois Henry, who asks, what is your plan to help farm workers after groundwater restrictions prompted by the state's new groundwater law take full effect? For background, it's worth noting here an estimated 1 million acres of productive farmland will be taken out of production to fully comply with the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act.
All right, Mr. Shepard, how do you respond to the viewer question?
I think that overall, farm workers are suffering probably the most. And if I could just be honest right now, most of these individuals are the hardest working individuals that I have ever met in my entire life. So first of all, I want to say thank you to these individuals for making our communities what they are and for putting in the work for growing our food. It's incredible what they're doing, but we have failed them. We have failed them because of projects like SGMA. And so like I had referenced earlier, what we need to do is we need to stop transitional pumping fees. We need to figure out new methods to bringing new water sources here to the Central Valley. That looks like desalinization. That looks like the Twin Tunnels project up out of the Delta. That looks like Sites Reservoir. That looks like Whiskey Flats. We have failed our communities, not growers, not just farm workers. Everyone has suffered because of our water crisis that we're facing right now.
Ms. Parra, your thoughts on helping farm workers and groundwater restrictions prompted by the state's new groundwater law your plan?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Lois Henry. I did read the Valley Blueprint and also attended the conference in Visalia that actually had mayors representing the farm worker community. But I don't have to talk. I talk directly to farm workers impacted by water and the land fallowing every day, every week when I'm in the communities from Alpaugh to Allensworth, out in Dinuba, Ivanhoe, Farmersville. I'm out there talking to them, and you see the impacts of farm workers not being able to make their rent, of their school, of their children not being able to get to school. You know, you talk to the superintendents. There's a school district in Tulare has a $1.3 million budget. When 3 children are out of not being able to attend school, that school district's budget drops $100,000. They're seeing declining enrollment. Our communities are already impacted. So what I would tell to the farm workers is that, like we did when we were marching with the Latino Water Coalition, like we are when we're talking to the Latino caucus up in Sacramento, we need action. You heard from the stage. You got an F, you got a D. We need to do something to protect our farm workers, cross-training, which we can get into later on, workforce training, but people are hurting now.
Ms. Parra, thank you. Time's up there. Mr. Tatum, your thoughts?
Just want to throw this out. When I first came to Bakersfield back in 2009 to be a pastor, a few years later I was able to participate in the march with Dolores Horta about farming. I had no idea what I was doing, but I just believed in the farmers. That being said, it's time for our farmers in the Central Valley to be just like that powerful union, standing together in demanding what they need to sustain their family, to sustain their livelihood. I think that, like 1 million acres, we should have 1 million voices sent all the way to Sacramento to let them know we're not going to take this anymore, and we demand to have sustainable water, underground water, whatever is necessary to feed people.
Thank you. Mr. Osorio, 1 minute, please.
Yes, so first of all, I'm proud to say that I'm endorsed by the United Farm Workers, and I'm glad we have a question about farm workers because we need a balanced approach. We talk about farmers, we gotta talk about farm workers. A couple of things here. There are documented and undocumented farm workers, and so if the question is how are we going to supply or fill the gap for the lack of employment for farm workers, we got to talk about expanding social safety net programs for these farm workers who oftentimes aren't eligible for these programs. We also have to talk about labor protections because that's a priority for them right now. And so for me, I want to just continue advocating for farm workers and follow their example. As Mr. Shepard just mentioned, they are the essential workers of the pandemic. They've been essential workers throughout the time that they've contributed to our Central Valley economy, and I'm happy to be endorsed by United Farm Workers.
A couple of questions now about health care. In 2020, California implemented Medi-Cal expansions primarily funded with state dollars to cover low-income, undocumented young adults. An expansion to include older undocumented adults will begin later this year. A majority of them, of course, are farm workers who help put food on our tables. Is this a public health policy that you all can support? Why or why not? Mr. Osorio, let me start with you.
Well, yes, this is a no-brainer for me. I completely support this policy because, again, I mentioned earlier that we have a large farm worker population in the Central Valley, half of which is estimated to be undocumented. And so for us to continue to expand healthcare access to individuals who aren't documented and don't have the same access to resources, I'm completely in support of that. I think the next step would be, of course, supporting universal healthcare coverage so that regardless of citizenship status, we can allow everyone to have access to healthcare.
Mr. Tatum, are you on board with that?
Okay, as a conservative, I think that it would be almost impossible to accommodate. It will be in the upper super billions of dollars, and I think we have to look at this more realistically and find other ways to meet this demand. I want everyone to be covered, but realistically, we're talking something that is almost impossible.
Nicole Parra?
Yes, I support 100%. Actually, this was agreed to in the budget last year. The governor and Latino caucus led by Senator Durazo, she was the one that worked to include the older immigrant community. And so it's absolutely incumbent upon us. You asked the question earlier about water, and you asked about, the effect on our farm worker community. And we need to ensure, when people are sick, and this goes to everyone, our emergency rooms are impacted. When people are sick, we need them to be able to get health care and preventative health care and take care of their children. And so there is a way to be able to make sure that those who are working, those who are working hard to support our agriculture industry, to support our economy. You know, remember during COVID-19, our essential workers were the ones, our first responders were the ones who kept our local economy moving forward. So yes, I absolutely support what's agreed upon last year in the state budget to help our farm worker community.
All right, same question to you, David Shepard.
Yeah, I think that everyone needs access to health care, and they need access to affordable health care, but I do not believe that the Medi-Cal expansions that we saw was going to be sufficient, nor was it going to be the right choice. I think we need to be able to provide health care, whether that looks like a different program altogether, but for you know, for someone who is from Latino heritage and descent, I want to see similar access. I want to have equal access across the board, but we need to figure out a way to also transition the undocumented immigrants into tax-paying members of society as well, so that way they're contributing back to the system. But and that looks like getting them their immigration moved forward at a quicker rate. So there's a lot of work to be done altogether, but I think that what we need to do is just focus on the main principle of looking at this as another Sacramento expenditure, and Sacramento doesn't seem to do anything well.
All right,
can I quickly respond to a comment made there?
Well, he didn't attack you. So
I just wanted
the rebuttals are reserved for that.
I just want to clarify that undocumented immigrants already pay some taxes here in the state of California.
All right, thank you, Mr. Osorio. All right, a hot button issue, and we are talking a little bit about the state budget. It was just added this week as Governor Newsom is now asking state lawmakers to set aside $125 million for expanding access to abortion services for women. That spending proposal, of course, triggered by revelations in Washington that the U.S. Supreme Court will overturn the federal abortion protections laid out in the landmark Roe v. Wade decision. Now, if you were in the state Senate today, would you support this new expenditure within the state budget? Mr. Tatum, we'll start with you.
Just to support abortion?
Correct,
that part?
Yes.
As a pastor, as a Christian, as a conservative, I am pro-life 100%. I will not compromise. I have 9 grandkids, and I love every last one of them, so I will not support a bill like this. Unapologetically, I will stand by my principles and my convictions.
All right, Mr. Shepard, your thoughts on this?
I am a pro-life candidate as well. I believe that this is just a ploy, though, by Sacramento to be able to rally their base in an election cycle, because the truth of the matter is that abortion is going to still be allowed here in the state of California. Nothing is going to change. This is purely a motive by the governor to be able to allow his party to have a reason to show up to the polls.
Mr. Osorio, would you vote, if you were in the state Senate today, to set aside $125 million to expand access to abortion rights and services?
You know, first, I want to say that I believe that California is ahead of the curve when you look at access to reproductive health care. And so as a cis male, I don't feel comfortable making a decision for women's bodies, and so I would vote for this bill.
Ms. Parra.
As the only woman on this panel here tonight, I support absolutely a woman's right to choose. However, I support California's law, which is that there is limits to abortion, where you can't get it after 23 weeks when you're looking at viability. There is no, if you look at California law now, there is no late-term abortion here in California. And what you're talking about in the governor's budget, there were 44 bills that were put together on reproductive rights that were put together by a coalition in December. There's about 14 bills that made it through in the May revise. I have still some concerns regarding paying for out-of-town people from outside the state to come and receive services. As we discussed earlier, we have a limited number of healthcare dollars, and I want to make sure that those folks who are paying taxes here for services for California. So I'd have to really review what the legislators decide on these 14 bills contained in the May revise. But again, absolutely clear, I support a woman's right to choose.
Thank you. I want to move on to what the FDA did this week. They authorized a COVID booster shot for kids 5 to 11 years of age. Should the state mandate that all students get the COVID shot and the booster? And secondly, should that mandate come from the legislature or should it come from the governor? Mr. Tatum, we'll begin with you.
I do not support that mandate. I have friends that I know that were forced to take different shots before the vaccine, and their kids are suffering. They have ailments that today, as adults, they're living with for taking certain vaccinations. So no, I would not support that whatsoever.
Mr. Osorio, your thoughts?
I think we have seen the effectiveness of COVID vaccines in its efforts to get us through the pandemic. And this has been one of the most effective tools to make sure that we can go back to living a normal life. And so I think this is a tricky question because, you know, there's issues around how we want parents to make the decision for their kids, but I do believe it is an effective way of reducing the exposure of COVID-19.
Mr. Shepard.
My grandmother died of COVID-19. And so this issue is very close to home. But absolutely no, I do not believe that the government should have any place in my family or making medical decisions for my kids. As a parent, I am abhorred by the idea that this would be something that comes down and gets in the place of what should be mine and my wife's choice with our own children. And so with that, I think we can look at the uproar that we've seen with parents all around. Across the state, across the United States. This is just another way that the government is going to try to get into our lives and try to mandate what we do on a day-to-day basis. And I don't think that that's the American way. I don't think that we are better off as a society allowing the government to take more of rights that should be our own medical rights. Before this all happened, we had HIPAA laws in place. And now that has gone out the window. So I believe in a parent's right to choose what's best for their children.
Ms. Parra.
Yeah, so vaccinations, this was very interesting. We have vaccinations that you are required to take or have your children take to go to public schools. And if you don't support those vaccinations, you can homeschool or, keep your kids out of public school. So, yes, I would support a COVID vaccination if it's one of the lists of schools. And there was a legislation that for 10-year-olds or 14 that they would do it without parental consent, which I absolutely 100% do not support. Parents have the right to be able to decide whether or not their children are vaccinated or not. However, if it's on a list of vaccinations that, the 10 to 12 that your kids get before going to school to protect them, to protect their teachers, then the children, just like other vaccinations, would need that to go to school. And again, parents have the choice, either put your kid in public school, get the vaccinations that are required, or you can keep your kids and homeschool your children. But, I hate this whole we're not going to vaccinate, pro-government, no government. Look, we're basically making it out of COVID. Let's get parents going here.
All right, Ms. Parra, thank you. We have a viewer question on the issue of law and order now, and let's go back to Maddie Gannon at the news desk for that. Maddie?
Alex on Jim, this question comes from Shelley Peck. She says, and we're quoting her here, everyone is affected by all this criminal activity, including catalytic converter thefts and a general disregard for the law, and they're getting away with it. What is your stand on punishing criminals and keeping them in jail, and how would you accomplish that?
All right, candidates, let's go around the horn on this one, starting with you, Mr. Osorio.
I've definitely heard the complaints specifically about catalytic converters. I think for me, what I'm leading with in this campaign is that I want a community-driven approach to public safety. And what that means is I want to get input from the communities where these crimes are happening so they can have a say on what local laws should be directing their police departments. And so I really believe that we should leave it up to the local governments for the police departments and, of course, the county governments for the sheriff's departments.
Ms. Parra?
My position on public safety has been to support our law enforcement community, ensuring they have the resources and ensuring that we are enforcing the law. And that's why I've been supported and endorsed by Sheriff Robinson in Kings County, by Corcoran Police Chief Ruben Shortnessy, and I'm also been endorsed by statewide Peace Officers Research Association of California, the largest state agency of police officers in the state of California. I was the author of Megan's Law. I work with district attorneys with Mothers Against Drunk Driving to ensure those who drive drunk can be put in for murder with the mens rea on intent. And so I feel very confident that if you support me and I'm in the state Senate, we can help bring that pendulum back to the middle ground and make sure our law enforcement officers have the resources that they need, in addition to the community having the resources and the help and assistance that they need. But it's been moving too far to the left, and we need to put some law and order back into the state of California.
Mr. Shepard?
I live out in the country, out pretty much in the middle of nowhere, as some people would call it, and crime is pervasive out there. We've had a dead body dumped in one of our orchards, the same orchard that my wife walks in with my 2 kids. We've had an employee held up at gunpoint. It's incredible to see how even out in the country, things that you'd expect to see or maybe would anticipate to see more often in the more urban areas is taking place where we're at. So first of all, we need to repeal Prop 47 and Prop 57. That needs to be done away with. I am very proud to have the endorsements of Sheriff Mike Boudreau, Sheriff Donnie Youngblood, and Sheriff Margaret Mims of Fresno County, because I believe that what we need to do is start from the ground up. We need to get our sheriffs involved. We need to be able to fund our police. This whole notion of defunding the police, absolutely ridiculous. When you are experiencing crime and you live out in the middle of nowhere, something's got to change.
Mr. Tatum, same question to you, sir.
Yes, I support our local police. Not only that, I've been involved with Bakersfield Safe Streets from 2009 to current, working with current chief right now, Greg Terry, also with Martin Lyle and many community leaders. We understand what's happening. As a pastor, I have officiated funerals of young men being shot down from guns. I have one coming up real soon, and I officiated one in November of a young man being shot down. I support law enforcement. I support that we need to do things as things are advancing because of inflation and because of the COVID situation of people not having jobs. The increase of crime is tremendous. So I would stand by ways to work with leadership and community people to try to offset that so we can have safer communities. And I've been doing this for 20 years in Los Angeles, Chicago. This is nothing new to me. So I'm the real deal. I'm not here playing around.
All right, candidates, you know, in Governor Newsom's latest budget proposal, he wants to shut down 3 more state prisons by 2025. He says it would save the state about $150 million a year. As violent crime has continued to rise throughout the state, would you vote in favor of closing down 3 more state prisons by 2025? Mr. Osorio.
Well, I think we got to look at the end of that question, which is we want to make more space for high-level offenders. And if this is a priority that I know the Central Valley has, we want to get those who commit the most egregious crimes into incarceration. But at the same time, for these low-level crimes, what is the purpose of incarceration for those folks? It's rehabilitation. Yeah, we don't see that happening so much. And so for me, when I think about this increase in crime, I think about where does it stem from? We got to look at these underlying social factors, these cultural factors that have come from the pandemic, that have come from poverty. And so I would support programs to alleviate poverty and making sure we're looking after folks who are released from prison. And so I would vote for this bill.
Ms. Parra.
Yeah, so closing 3 state prison, first of all, it's not going to happen in the state legislature, especially now. But when you look at, I've gone into the state prison. When I was on the budget sub 3 in the state assembly, I was in Delano, Corcoran 1, Corcoran 2, Delano 1, Wasco, all of the state prison, including the Coalinga mental facility. And let me tell you, we need the space. We need to ensure that we can put high-risk felons, and we need to look at reforming Proposition 47. And so I would not support the closure of prisons, but I would look at reforming. I would look at, when I talk to the law enforcement community, we need to bring back some of the rehab programs. We need to be able to bring back some of the programs that have been cut, the funding. And so, no, I don't support cutting state prisons. I actually work with Department of Corrections in helping to expand some of the funding for the prisons to protect the correctional officers in the prisons. But no, I would not support closing 3 state prisons.
Mr. Tatum.
Because of recidivism, many of our prisoners are making that their permanent home. This attrition may, in some cases, be palatable, but for the most part, it's necessary because of what's happening that we must keep them open. But we must look at it, as Nicole Parra said, as ways to rehabilitate and cut down the recidivism rate, because it is becoming ridiculous. That's not your home. You need to get a life and move on.
Mr. Shepard.
I would vote no. It's humorous to me that the governor says that he doesn't have enough money to keep these prisons open when we have a $97.5 billion surplus, according to him. So I think it's a ridiculous attempt on his part in Sacramento to try to, again, further their agenda with letting criminals out early The Sacramento shooting that took place a couple weeks ago, it was because a violent offender was let out of their prison sentence early. This is what happens when we're rushing to further an agenda and we don't think things through. We need to look at this holistically. I support the idea of prison reform. I support the idea of trying to rehabilitate people. But in order to do so, you have to think about the situation holistically. You cannot rush something like closing 3 prisons all of a sudden because there's not enough money. That's ridiculous. There's plenty of money.
Okay, we got about 2 minutes left here. We're going to try and squeeze in one last question. If elected to represent the 16th Senate District candidates, what would you do, or would you do anything to get the governor to take his feet off the brakes of approving new oil drilling permits in Kern County? About 30 seconds apiece. Would you encourage the governor to re-energize our oil industry here in the Valley? Mr. Osorio?
No, I really believe that we need to be transitioning away from the fossil fuel industry for a number of reasons, from job sustainability to the environmental impacts that this industry has had, to the people living near oil and gas drilling. A couple of years ago, this was a hot topic in Kern County because we had a number of residents speak out in opposition to the expansion of oil and gas drilling because they live near them and they have the most disproportionate health impacts. Okay. And so I believe that we have to support our workers through a just transition and make sure that we are doing this in an equitable manner.
Nicole Parra, can you give me a 20-second?
I'll try. As the only person on this stage who's worked in the energy field for the last 5 years, the governor's not going to increase the permits. But we have to be able to produce our energy here, be self-sufficient. We have 30% production here. We are doing renewable diesels. We have a place where we can do carbon sequestration and capture. Kern County is the jewel when it comes to energy reform, and we need to fight for that for our workers and our community.
Mr. Shepard?
I would absolutely support streamlining, encouraging the governor to streamline some of these bills. Some of the highest paying jobs in Kern County are from the oil industry, so this would benefit the entire community. And also, we make the cleanest energy in the world here in Kern County. So I believe that Sacramento is in an identity crisis when they say that they want to reduce fossil fuel emissions and their carbon footprint, but they're not looking into drilling the oil here.
And Mr. Tatum?
Definitely support drilling. My family has a powerful name from Tatum, Oklahoma. If you look up the history, black gold, they found old oil there. My ancestor moved here from 1907 as a farmer to Wasco, so we are from the oil background. So definitely would encourage them 100%.
All right, candidates, we have just enough time for closing statements, and we want to proceed in the same order as we did with opening statements, and that means we will start with you, Gregory Tatum. Closing statement, 30 seconds, please, sir.
Thank you so much. I appreciate this opportunity to represent you tonight, and not just tonight, but as the new representative of the 16th District. Why don't you try something different? Go with a veteran that was a part of the following of the Berlin Wall, will not run and hide, is working with police officers, been working with cities for almost 20 years, doing things now to try to keep our streets very safe. Don't go with the 60% of the politicians that are running in this position. Go with Tatum, a United States vet. Thank you.
All right, David Shepard, closing statement, please, sir.
This election will be a bellwether for California state politics, and it provides us an opportunity to put an independent voice in Sacramento that isn't going to allow a political party to be able to decide what the votes are going to look like. 1 in 3 jobs is associated with the ag industry here in the Central Valley, and as the only farmer on this stage, I believe I'm the best person to represent our district and address our water crisis. My name is David Shepard. I would be honored to have your vote, and I ask that you send me to Sacramento to fight for you. And also, if you'd like to check out my website, shepardforsenate.com.
Okay, Brian Osorio, closing statement, please, sir.
Yes, first I would like to thank my wife, my friends, and supporters for helping us run a corporate-free grassroots campaign. And to the voters, I know how frustrating it may be asking for you to vote for us when we see inflation, when we see all these high prices on gas and food, but we're asking you to support our grassroots campaign so that you have a new fighter in Sacramento.
All right, and finally, Nicole Parra with your closing statement.
Thank you. What we need in Sacramento is an effective, experienced leader, and that I give you my resume. 30 years of working in the federal government, state government, and being an adjunct professor, but most importantly, I stand with 100 local community leaders, Republicans and Democrats. From my work before 2016, I was the campaign manager for Measure J, Porterville College, BC, Bakersfield College, brought $500 million to our Kern Community College District. I've written bills, I know how to pass budgets, I've traveled up and down the state. Please vote Nicole Parra for State Senate.
Well, that's going to do it for tonight's candidates debate. We want to thank Brian Osorio, Nicole Parra, Dave Shepard, and Gregory Tatum. We want to say good luck to everyone. Thanks to Jim Scott, our entire team here. I'm Alexander Balakian. Again, thank you so much for joining us. And don't forget to vote June 7th.
Good night.